Hi, friends. This is Adam Shoemaker, Rector here at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in downtown Charleston, back for another edition of Rector's Corner. And I'm very happy to have with me today our youth minister, Dorothy Porcher-Holland. Dorothy, thank you very much for making the time to be with me. This is your second full programmatic year working with us now at St. Stephen's. I'd love to talk a little bit about the role that you now have that's expanded from what it was when you arrived, as well as our offerings as we move into the fall. But before I do that, you have such a background, Dorothy, in Christian education in the church. I wonder if you could just share a little bit about your history as a Christian educator.
I'd be happy to do that. I started volunteering with the youth group at my home parish in my mid-20s. And my now husband and I started dating, and he started to also volunteer with the youth group. And at that time, I was a Montessori teacher. And I got laid off from my job here, and I took a job in North Carolina teaching at Sonia Curry's Montessori school. You may know Sonia Curry as the mother of Stephen and Seth Curry. And
wow.
Yeah. So I knew them when they were little boys. They were sweet kids. So anyway, while I was there, I joined St. Patrick's Episcopal Mission in Mooresville and started volunteering with their youth group as well. And when my home church decided to hire a professional youth minister, I actually tried to get Jonathan to apply for the job. And he said, that's really not me. You should apply for it. And I said, I'm a teacher. And on one day, 3 different people from that church called me, long distance. That's how long ago it was, to ask why I hadn't applied for the job. And it frankly hadn't occurred to me to do so because I was a teacher. And then I thought, but I could move back home, and I love doing youth ministry. So I auditioned. I used to be an actor. I interviewed for the job and I got it. And that was in I started in the August of 1999. And I was there for 7 years. During that time, the diocese had a 2-year optional youth ministry certification course. And I took that, and we did apologetics and ethics and systematic theology and Old Testament and New Testament and redemptive theology and all those things. And I really haven't looked back. When I left full-time ministry, when I became a mother, the diocesan youth ministry coordinator said, "Can I find you a little bitty church that just needs a part-time youth minister?" And so I did that. And so I was part-time for several years, and then I worked at 2 churches at the same time for 3 years. And then my most recent post before St. Stephen's was at Church of the Holy Communion. So it's been an exciting and wonderful journey. And during that time, I've sometimes handled Christian education and sometimes I haven't. And that brings me to St. Stephen's, where I have felt incredibly welcome, and my family has been very happy, and we're here for the long haul.
Terrific, Dorothy. Wow, that's quite a background of experience you've had in the church, and what a wonderful formation program it sounds like you were able to have several years ago. That's wonderful that was offered, and it makes me think about how we in the church, across dioceses in the church, should be making more opportunities for formation for all orders of ministry, lay and ordained.
I agree. It was incredible for me. Nowadays, there are a lot more schools, colleges that offer degrees in youth ministry. When I was in high school, that wasn't even a thing. No one did that. And so, but now a lot of people are finding that calling after maybe they've completed their college education. You know, people just come into youth ministry in different ways. And for me, that was amazing. And I also went to conferences with youth specialties and workshops here. And I went down to the Diocese of Central Florida for their annual youth ministry training week. I did that once. I was always seeking out ways to learn and be educated. I did 2 years of certification for catechesis of the Good Shepherd as well. Self-funded. I always want to have a chance to learn more and to learn more about my faith, because the more I have an understanding of my faith, the better I'm able to share that with young people.
Well, and it makes me want to ask the question. It should be self-evident, but before we get into your role here at St. Stephen's, broadly speaking, Dorothy, why do you think it's important that we in the church invest ourselves in church school, in youth group, in formation programmings for young people?
Well, primarily because if they don't have an opportunity to hear the gospel, they don't have an opportunity to hear the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And the Great Commission tells us that we are supposed to be sharing the gospel and baptizing people and welcoming them into the faith. So, first of all, I always considered an outreach, even church school, which is primarily, I know, for the students in our church. It also exists for the students who are not yet there.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, I believe that, well, I made something for a ministry fair that I decided was probably too much and I didn't put it out. I have a what looks like a book, but it's really a box, and you open it like a book and it's empty. And I actually put in it, if your children don't understand what's in the Bible, it may as well be an empty book.
Hmm.
I decided, well, maybe I'm not going to put that out. And so I didn't, but I still believe that. And many parents don't feel empowered to teach the Bible at home and to model the faith. They are modeling it whether they know they are or not, but they don't feel empowered to do that. They don't know how, they don't know where to start. They might be uncomfortable themselves talking with your kids in a lot of ways about God, and it might make them feel insecure in their own faith, that maybe theirs isn't good enough, so maybe they shouldn't share it with their children. It's also a way that we're creating community and fellowship within our church. And when people feel connected, not just to the church, but to the people, and not just the clergy, but the people, they are more likely to stay with the church. And then the church can enrich their lives while they enrich the church. So I think it's important to the people individually in providing not only community, but education and understanding. There's so much, even adults who grew up in the church just don't understand. You know that. And you make a statement that you think is common knowledge, and they say, what? The sermon is based on the Bible lesson that they just read us? And they're shocked. They had no idea that that was a thing, or they don't understand the lectionary. And our church and our faith, the Christian faith and the Episcopal Church, are so rich with so much and so many details and things that weave together in beautiful and magnificent ways that people just don't understand. And I feel like there's always a moment of discovery that helps to spark our continued faith. And so if we keep learning, we keep discovering, and it helps us to grow deeper in our relationship with God.
Absolutely, Dorothy. And I do think that in the times in which we live, there are more and more unchurched people coming through our doors. The Spirit is tugging on them to come through our doors, but we can't assume, as perhaps folks once did generations ago, that there's a basic common knowledge. We always have to continue to be willing to teach and reteach some of the basics of the faith. And I think getting involved in our Christian education for our young people can really be formative, not just for them, but for the adults who volunteer as well. It's a really, really important ministry.
When I did my first year-long training in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, which was for level 1, 3 to 6-year-olds, I was many years into my youth ministry career. I'd done the course with the diocese. I'd done so many things. And yet, in preparation to teach 3-year-olds, I learned so much more about the liturgy and the richness of the theology and everything, that it was dumbfounding. It was dumbfounding what I didn't know walking into that. And how I walked out of it was absolutely amazing. Now, did I teach all of those things in layers to all the little 3-year-olds? No, but I was able to guide them through the things that they were doing because I had that understanding in myself.
Well, Dorothy, we hired you last year to be a part-time youth minister here at St. Stephen's. We'd pretty recently renovated our Christian education classrooms. We were so happy to welcome the community of youth that in many respects, I feel like followed you to St. Stephen's. And so can you talk a little bit about the rhythm of youth group and how your role has begun to evolve? We've expanded it some with the transition of Reverend Laura leaving and Father Will coming in, and us wanting to create some space and time for Father Will also to be reaching out to the College of Charleston. Can you talk a little bit about how your role has expanded in sort of the rhythm of our offerings for youth?
I absolutely can. Youth group always starts off in the fall, typically right after Labor Day, and we have what I call an autobiographical potluck supper, which is an opportunity for us to break bread together and share stories of our lives that might not ever come up in conversation. For a couple of weeks, we do a lot of getting to know each other in fellowship games, not lame icebreakers. So it doesn't feel like going to a business conference, and sort of establish a comfort zone and a safe place for the young people, and so that they will be encouraged to bring their friends. Everyone is welcome. Students from our church, students from other churches, students who don't believe. Over the years, I've had Jewish students in my youth group, many atheists, and kids from other churches that sort of have come along with their friends. As we go through the year, we do have a curriculum that's rooted in the gospel. I usually come up with it myself because it's going to change based on questions that they have, discussions we end up with. Something that I did on the fly last year, we had a series of workshops in February. We had one on marriage. We had one on the justice ministry. We had one on racism. I'm going to be planning that to happen more often during the year and looking to the kids for topics to discuss. And so ideally, we become a community that is supporting one another, growing together as a community while growing in our faith. And I'm needing to have programming that reaches both seekers that have never heard the gospel before, as well as kids that have been raised in the church. And there's a lot of middle ground on that as well. And so welcoming in new people while at the same time making sure that the people that have already been there are being discipled and ready to welcome new people. And so it's a process that goes on over the year. I'm still in my second year. It's always a challenge to get older kids from a church where there hasn't been a tradition of youth ministry to come to youth group. I will never give up on them, and I will never stop reaching out to them. But you end up, when establishing new ministry, focusing a lot on the middle school years, 6th through 8th grade, because that's where you're more likely to get kids to, they don't have as many activities or as much homework or a job or things like that. So there's a lot of focus right now on that middle school group. And so we have supper. We pray for each other, as in, does anyone have any prayer requests? I tell them that there are effectively 3 kinds of prayers: thank you, please, and excuse me. And and so we share our Thanksgivings, and then we share the things that are on our hearts. We don't typically share the excuse me's, but I remind them that that's an important private part of prayer. And so then we literally pray together, and we have some icebreakers or an activity that's always going to tie into what comes up later.
That's great.
How it goes.
It's been so wonderful to see the community forming and using that space up there in the upper Iris Carson classroom. And can you talk a little bit about the rhythm and the time frame of the different groups that you have?
Oh, yes. Yeah. We meet on Monday nights, and I want everyone to have supper together, the older kids and the younger kids together. So the middle school group meets at 5:45, and they meet until 7:15. But at 6:45, the high schoolers arrive. And we have supper from 6:45 to 7:15. And then the high schoolers meet from 7:15 to 8:15. So each group gets an hour of separate programming, and then we have a 30-minute shared meal in the middle.
And for parents who might be listening into this conversation, I assume for a teen, they can pop in as their schedule allows.
Absolutely. We do not take roll. We don't have any tests. There's almost never homework. And kids slip in and out with the sports seasons. We have a student who had been a Boy Scout ever since he could walk, and that has always been on Monday nights. And so sometimes he alternates, and then other times he just leaves right after the program and goes straight to Boy Scouts. We have kids that come late because they've just finished sports team, and it's super important that they want to come to youth group. So there is no late, there is no early leaving, there is only showed up. And we are always glad to see our friends when they get there and when they can come, and we'll always be waiting when volleyball season is over.
Terrific. Yeah, I certainly know every church has to compete with the busy schedules of teenagers, tweens and teens.
Yes, and I've tried this on Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, Friday nights. There is not a perfect night. You'd think Sunday night would be better, but then it's a beautiful day, we're going out in the boat, or we were out of town and we just got in, or we didn't do any homework all weekend and we have tons. So you just have, it's easier in a giant church than it is in a smaller church, but we make it work because kids today are so very busy that they actually need youth group more than they ever did.
Yeah, yeah, and the kind of community that we offer in the church, real, honest to goodness, incarnational community. I've often thought about that, and the digital age in which our young people are growing up in, I think, is so important. I think it's hugely important for adults too, to actually have real time opportunities for connection, community, and formation.
Yes, and I'm kind of an anomaly in the lives of kids. I'm not a parent, I'm not an aunt or an uncle. I'm not their teacher, their principal, their coach, their dance instructor. I'm a free adult. And I'm able to make a connection with them when, I mean, I've had middle of the night calls like you wouldn't believe over the last 20 years. I got one at midnight. Dorothy, I can't stay here anymore. Please come get me. Sweetie, I can't come get you at midnight. That's not how things work. Hold on. Then the parent gets on the phone. Please come get her. We need to be apart. We need some time apart. And so I drove up Highway 61 and picked up the student with, I had someone else in the car, and we drove back, and they stayed at the house, and the mom picked them up in the morning for school. I mean, they were there 6 hours, but that family just needed that moment.
Wow.
And, they can come to me when things go wrong, when things are great, when they're grieving, when they're sad, when they're stressed out. The parents can reach out to me when they're not sure how to handle a situation, or, they need a referral for something. I'm just this extra person that is involved and engaged with the students, and I genuinely love them.
I think that is so important, and another real blessing of church for those of us who have kids is to have other adults in our children's lives who they can form relationships with that are not us as the parents. I do think that that's really important, and the kind of intergenerational community that can form in the church. There's not a lot of public spaces anymore that offer that kind of community. There might have been more in previous generations.
Yeah, it is so important to me that my kids also go to youth group at another church, so that I'm not their youth minister.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not recommending that for other families, but my kids need an adult that's not their youth minister. So we have to find 2 nights a week to fit youth group in for my kids.
Yeah, it makes me think about how we clergy are often encouraged to try to find another community to go to church, because there is an element for the clergy where it's hard to worship yourself when you are actively leading worship. Well, another role, Dorothy, that I know you've begun to take on in the transition from Laura to Will is coordinating our Sunday morning church school for the little ones that is just about to start. By the time this interview is uploaded, I believe we will have already had our first church school classes, but could you talk a little bit about the rhythm there and how the classes are going to be broken down?
Yes, I'm super excited about church school this year. We meet on the first and the third Sundays of every month, and we're doing a little shake up with the grades and the breakdown this year. And so I want to make sure that I have it straight in my head. Will and I have been working on it. So we're going to have kindergarten through third grade downstairs, and then we're going to have fourth, fifth, and sixth in another room, and then seventh and up in a different room. And while we had been looking at a whole lot of different curriculums, we've ended up working with Illustrated Children's Ministry. It does follow the lectionary and the liturgical calendar, which are super, super important to me that we do that. I think that when the kids are learning about the same scripture that the parents hear in church and that the sermon is based on, it's a lot better to stimulate a discussion, on the way home or maybe over lunch. And it can also help the parents have better questions than how was Sunday school today? It was fine. And to learn a little bit about it. So even if the question becomes, what did you do in Sunday school today? Or what did you learn? The child could say something that would spark the parent to say, we actually talked about that in church. Father Adam said something about that in his sermon. So that was for me key. And another thing that was key was, let's find something that's not going to require hours and hours and hours of preparation for our church school teachers. And I'm very excited that a certain husband of mine has come out of retirement. He has not taught Sunday school since we had children because he had to be the parent in charge. And I have never asked him to be a Sunday school teacher in all the years that I've done ministry because I just didn't think that was a fair question. So he volunteered on his own. And so he will be joining the ranks this year. And so I'm excited about what we're going to do. We're going to continue to work with the liturgical calendar and say the Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm every week and help the kids learn that. I challenge some of the adults in the parish with the 23rd Psalm and the liturgical calendar at the ministry fair on Sunday. And I can tell that we definitely need to keep teaching that.
Yeah, I do like lectionary-based curriculum for church school to create that commonality because, I always have said when I've had oversight of children and youth ministry in a church as an ordained person, that the best and first teachers are your parents, right? That the communication that comes at home is ultimately going to be the strongest word. And so it's helpful to have some common ground and opportunities for exchange from what the adults might be hearing in church vis-a-vis the children.
Agree.
I will also, for those listening in, mention for parents and families, we'll say, the rhythm, and we're continuing this from last year. We have the first and third Sundays, second Sundays. Of course, we'll continue to do our breakfast at Saffron, which helps to create a community amongst our growing number of young families. On those first and third Sundays, there also will be coffee up in the rectory that Reverend Courtney will offer for parents. And of course, for the pre-K children, for those younger than kindergarten, Miss Betty and Miss Lynn continue to offer nursery care. And we also have, special opportunities through the liturgical year. As we're having this conversation, it will have already passed by the time this conversation is uploaded. We'll of course have had our annual Feast of St. Francis Blessing of the Animals service, but towards the end of October, we will have our blessing of the costumes, and children will be invited to come to church in their Halloween costumes, and we can tie some of that into the observances around All Souls and All Saints in the church. So we always are looking for ways to engage our young people and make good use of that liturgical calendar, because there are so many formational ways that you can lean into the calendar that we follow in the Episcopal Church.
There really are, and it helps keep Sunday school classes from focusing on the same stories over and over. I promise you that when I was a young child, all we talked about was the Old Testament stories and occasionally a parable. You know, we talked about Noah, and we talked about Esther, and we talked about Moses, and I didn't learn anything about how the church year goes or anything like that. I glued so many cotton balls on pictures of sheep that I can't even tell you. And so I always aim to find something that's more enriching than that and is going to connect to the larger whole.
Well, Dorothy, as we begin to wrap up this conversation, I would just ask, how can the congregation at St. Stephen's be supportive of you in the ministry that you have with us in this place?
Well, first of all, with prayer. I am always looking for people who will commit to praying for youth group every Monday night while we're having youth group. You know, not the whole time that we're there, but at some point between 5:45 and 8:15, that they will have a note to stop and actively pray for the young people in the youth room, the young people who aren't in the youth room that night, the young people who we haven't found yet or who haven't found us, and for me and for Father Will as we lead them. That is super important. Another way people can support us is by signing up to provide dinner. And you can also just sign up to provide money for dinner if you're not a big cook. And the kids don't want anything fancy. They like tacos and lasagna. And this one time someone brought 4 different of the Costco take and bake casseroles, and they all got to choose a casserole, and they thought that was fantastic. You know, pizza, you know, we have to order pizza every now and then. We try not to do pizza too often. Someone did a baked potato bar once, and they thought that was the greatest thing ever. They baked the potatoes, they put them in a cooler wrapped in a towel, and they brought sour cream and, you know, all the stuff to put on baked potatoes in a salad. They loved that. Someone else made us grilled cheeses once, and we warmed them up in the oven downstairs. So it doesn't have to be fancy, and they're picky eaters anyway. Don't get fancy. I don't know what these kids eat. And but we would love to have dinner brought to us or dinner funded. When dinner is not picked up by someone, I'll get pizza. Sometimes I cook it myself. And then sometimes this week we're going to do a special thing called cereal night. Everybody's going to bring a box of their favorite cereal, and I'm going to bring milk, and we're all going to have cereal for supper. And some brave and enterprising middle schoolers are going to try to mix all the cereals together, and then we'll watch them try to eat that. It usually works unless they mix fruity and chocolatey cereals in the same bowl. That really doesn't ever work out. And we're going to try to theme it with fall and Halloween special cereals right now. And Father Will is super excited about the pumpkin spice Cheerios.
And if people want to sign up to provide a meal on a Monday night, should they just contact you directly?
They can contact me directly. They can check the deacon for the link to the online sign up. I have made a very, very basic youth group landing page that just has the times and the days that we meet, and it has a link to the meal sign up. Or they can reach out to Amanda. They can also just email me, and I'll fill out the online form happily for them. That way we know that no one else will sign up for the same day.
And I assume, Dorothy, if somebody in the parish is listening to this conversation and feels like they might be interested in volunteering or helping out with our ministry to children and youth, they can email you, set up a time to talk with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific. Terrific. Well, Dorothy, thanks so much for making the time. Thank you so much for all that you do for this very important ministry. Dorothy also jumped in. I'll note to organize our Spirit of St. Stephen's Ministry Fair this year that went really well, and I know a lot of ministries that had some new signups from that. Thank you for your involvement in our fellowship of faith and that of your family. Thank you to those listening in. I'll be back next month for another edition of Rector's Corner. In the meantime, friends, you stay safe, you stay well, and keep the faith. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.